Joan's doing everything she can to keep herself and her loved ones healthy. Her family eats right, they exercise, she stays up on the latest health news, and sees her doctor regularly. None of it seems to be helping. Joan's husband just had to switch to a stronger blood pressure medication, her youngest son is overweight, and Joan's doctor says if her own numbers aren't better by her next blood test, she has some difficult and expensive decisions to make. Joan's ready to do what it takes to be healthy, if someone will just tell her what that is. I completely understand Joan's frustration. My name's Ralph Kinney, and at 5:32 p.m. on August 7th, 2014, I became a 51-year-old first-time father. That night, the nurses were kind enough to bring into my wife's room a cot, and as I lay there next to my sleeping wife and my new daughter, I realized, like any new father, that my life had just radically changed. But I'm a scientist, so I was doing math in my head, and it went something like this. When my daughter graduates from high school, I'll be 69. When she completes university, I'll be in my mid-70s. By the time she gets married, maybe 80-something, and by the time she has children of her own, I could be well into my 90s. I want to be there for all of that, not just as an observer, but as an active participant. I understood then and there that I owe it to my wife and my new daughter to live as long as I can, as healthy as I can. Since then, living longer and improving my health has become a major part of my life and the focus of my research. As a scientist, I've read thousands of research papers, and as an herbalist, I've traveled the world and soaked up the wisdom of traditional medicine. I've discovered the missing piece to the health and longevity puzzle. I've reinvented a 2,400-year-old Chinese formula that makes adding years to your life simple and easy. If you're like Joan and you want to live a longer, healthier, and more fulfilling life, but you feel lost in all the conflicting information and confusion, then please watch this entire video to discover the easiest and only scientifically proven way to add years to your life and the lives of everyone you care about. Each passing day brings the familiar and depressing statistics closer to being your own personal nightmare. 35% of U.S. men and 40.5% of women are now obese. Cardiovascular disease claimed 611,000 people last year alone. Diabetes is the fastest growing disease in the world. Cholesterol drugs are now the most prescribed medication. And in 2016, the average American family spent $25,826 on health care, and it just keeps going up. And do you know what's crazy? These modern epidemics were all rare conditions just a few generations ago. In his book, The Case Against Sugar, researcher Gary Taub presents this chart at the rate of admissions for diabetes in one Philadelphia hospital at the turn of the century. In 1890, experts estimated that 1 out of 50,000 people had diabetes. By 1939, it was 2 out of every 1,000, and doctors were already calling it an epidemic. In more recent data, the Center for Disease Control says that in 1958, roughly 1% of Americans had diabetes. Now, experts predict that 1 out of 3 Americans alive today will get diabetes and suffer the consequences. In less than 150 years, we've went from 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 3. The rate of growth is similar for all the conditions that we talked about. Across the board, chronic disease has increased dramatically. That's truly frightening when you consider what that means to you personally. Think about yourself and 2 of your loved ones. At least 1 of you will suffer from diabetes. 1 of you will likely die from cardiovascular disease, and all of you will struggle with at least 1 debilitating chronic illness. What do we find if we look even further back in time, back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors? Anthropologist Daniel Lieberman, in his book The Story of the Human Body, provides this list of diseases that anthropologists agree were virtually non-existent among our hunter-gatherer forebears. Modern hunter-gatherer populations also have low rates of chronic disease. Field studies show them to be generally free of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity. So what changed? The logical first assumption is that these are diseases of aging. Because we're living longer, the logic goes, we're only just now beginning to see these illnesses. Many public policymakers bought into this theory and refer to this cluster of chronic conditions as diseases of aging. Yet, the rates of diseases are growing far faster than the population growth among seniors. Chronic illness is growing across all adult age groups, and seniors among modern hunter-gatherers are healthy and do not suffer from these same diseases. Something other than simple aging is at work here. Another popular theory is that we don't get as much exercise as our ancestors, and so chronic illness sets in. That theory fell apart when anthropologists with the National Science Foundation funded a project to measure the total daily energy expenditure among the Hadza tribe, a group of modern hunter-gatherers in Tanzania. As shocking as it sounds, the Hadza's daily energy expenditures were about the same as the average American. So if it's not the increase in the aging population or changes in activity level, what has changed? Scientists got the first clue over 8 decades ago. A puzzling thing happened during the Great Depression. During years when millions of Americans went hungry and medical care was unaffordable, lifespans in America increased an average of 6 years. At about the same time, 1935, researchers at Cornell University discovered that, surprisingly, severe calorie restriction dramatically increased the lifespans of lab mice. These two clues launched decades of research into the effects of calorie restriction on lifespan and health. The phenomenon was confirmed in many different species. The evidence is now irrefutable. Calorie restriction extends lifespan. This exciting research sparked a small but dedicated group of enthusiasts who adopted a chronic calorie restriction lifestyle. We call these people cronies. Professor Luigi Fontana at Washington State studies these people and calls them astonishing. He claims the people who practice chronic calorie restriction are so much healthier than the average American, they could almost be a different species. Whether you measure fitness, blood sugar, blood pressure, cholesterol, arthritis, obesity, or memory, these people test as though they were 20 to 30 years younger than their peers. As effective as chronic calorie restriction is in improving health and extending life, it's not a lifestyle change that most people are willing to adopt, because it means consistently consuming less than half the calories of an average person. It's also not consistent with how our ancestors ate. They somehow managed to consume about the same number of calories we do today, and still were much healthier. This led me and many leading longevity researchers to search for a way to get the benefits of calorie restriction without the sacrifices. About 20 years ago, researchers began to focus on how we eat instead of what we eat. They discovered something called intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is simply extending the length of time between meals or eating a lot less a few days each week. Researchers believe intermittent fasting works so well because it closely mimics the eating patterns of our ancestors. For most of human history, we ate larger meals and rested longer between them. 2 decades of research now proves that this style of eating has dramatic health benefits, and the scientific world is in agreement that intermittent fasting is the easiest way to add years to your life. Let's talk about some of those health benefits. The first and most obvious benefit is weight loss. Many people are first attracted to fasting by the opportunity to quickly and healthily lose weight. Intermittent fasting is a powerful way to shed pounds of fat, but probably not for the reasons you think. Scientists now understand that weight loss is about more than just calories in versus calories out. That grossly oversimplified way of thinking is the reason that, despite spending north of $60 billion a year on weight loss, obesity rates continue to rise. To achieve sustained, healthy weight loss, you must solve the metabolic problems. Intermittent fasting does just that. It's like pushing the reset button on your metabolism by reminding your body how to burn fat instead of sugar and carbs. A 2007 study funded by the National Institute on Aging compared a test group of people who ate just 1 meal per day with another group that ate 3 meals per day. Both groups ate the same number of calories for 8 weeks. The 1 meal a day group lost an average of 4.4 pounds, and that loss was all fat. Their lean body mass remained unchanged. Now, stop to think about that for a second. They lost almost half a pound per week while eating exactly the same amount of calories as the control group, which lost no weight at all. The only difference between the two groups was when they ate, not what they ate. Fasting also depletes blood insulin levels. You must lower insulin in order to burn fat. Which leads us to talk about type 2 diabetes. When we constantly eat sugar or carbohydrates, glucose circulates in our bodies all the time, as does the hormone needed to process it, insulin. This constant presence of insulin causes the cells of the body to lose insulin sensitivity, and the cells absorb glucose less effectively. Since glucose remains present in the bloodstream, your body responds by producing even more insulin, which aggravates the insensitivity, and this vicious cycle continues. Intermittent fasting periodically depletes your insulin. Your cells are given the chance to regain sensitivity. Blood glucose is used more efficiently, which further reduces insulin production. Many people have completely reversed type 2 diabetes by implementing intermittent fasting. By the way, this isn't new. In 1915, Dr. Frederick Allen, one of the world's first diabetes specialists, chronicled hundreds of successful treatments using fasting. Until 1921, fasting was considered the gold standard for treating this otherwise incurable disease. What changed in 1921? The pharmaceutical industry announced a magic pill called insulin, and unsuspecting patients eagerly embraced it, never realizing they were fighting fire with fire. Almost 100 years later, we're finally discovering that the magic pill wasn't so magic after all. Big Pharma has done this to us time and time again. Now let's tackle the #1 cause of death in America today, cardiovascular disease. First, both obesity and high insulin levels are known risk factors for cardiovascular disease. By helping address these two concerns, we're already a leg up. Intermittent fasting is also shown to reduce chronic inflammation throughout the body, another huge contributor to cardiovascular disease. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room, the thing everybody seems to talk about when we talk about heart disease, high cholesterol, or what I like to call the great statin scam. When I first started researching health and longevity, this one came as a big shock to me. I assumed as a physicist that all this talk about cholesterol and statin drugs was based on science. I've discovered it's actually based on phenomenally bad science. Prepare to be outraged while I unravel this one for you. The risk of cardiovascular disease is most easily quantified with a simple blood test for cholesterol. If you're over 40 and you've had a routine physical, you've had this test. But why are cholesterol levels elevated in people with cardiovascular disease? Is it a cause or an effect? When the inner lining of a blood vessel is damaged, your body sends cholesterol to repair it. Cholesterol acts as a kind of sealant over the damaged tissue. This is why high cholesterol is associated with cardiovascular disease. It's the direct result of your body's repair efforts. Statin drugs lower cholesterol, which is another way of saying they stop you from healing yourself and mask the underlying condition. This is like going to your mechanic with an oil leak in your car, and instead of fixing the leak, he charges you to put tape over your check oil light. Worse yet, recent studies have found that statin drugs may actually aggravate the real problem. It's a scam of epic proportions, a $19 billion per year scam. Intermittent fasting heals the underlying problems. Several studies show that intermittent fasting reduces a broad range of cardiovascular disease risk factors and reduces cholesterol levels. But in this case, the cholesterol isn't artificially repressed. The blood vessel damage was healed, and so the body does not need to divert cholesterol to the blood. What about cancer? Did you know that 80% of cancer cells cannot use energy from fat? This is a phenomenon called the Warburg effect. Dr. Otto Warburg was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine over 75 years ago for this discovery. When you fast, your body shifts to fat for fuel. Cancer cells can't make that same switch. When you fast, cancer cells literally starve to death. What's more, IF research shows that while fasting, your body withstands the toxicity of chemotherapy better and accelerates a process called apoptosis that clears away non-functioning cancer cells. How's that for a 1-2 punch? With that short list, we've already cut our risk of the leading causes of death in America in half. In addition to these, intermittent fasting has also been shown beneficial to the immune system, memory and cognitive function, including Alzheimer's disease, chronic inflammation, kidney disease, liver disease, epilepsy, and ADD. And fasting improves your gut microbiome, which also has tremendous benefits to your overall health. Intermittent fasting not only fights disease, it also puts the brakes on aging. Sugar and other carbohydrates are dirty fuel. They produce an excess of free radicals that play havoc with the cells of the body and cause genetic malfunctions. Free radical damage is believed to be one of the major causes of aging. When you fast, your body uses fat for fuel. Fat is clean energy and produces far fewer free radicals. Intermittent fasting also improves stem cell production and organ regrowth. When you fast, your major organs shrink and your number of white blood cells decline as your body uses a self-repairing process called autophagy. When your fasting ends and you refeed, stem cells and human growth hormone increases. Your organs and white blood cells return to their pre-fast size, but now with new, healthy cells. Increased human growth hormone also helps replace fat with lean muscle, improves libido, bone growth, and boosts your immune system. Intermittent fasting also stimulates longevity by inhibiting something called the mTOR pathway. Scientists believe that the mTOR gene is an important regulator of longevity. A drug that inhibits mTOR called rapamycin got a lot of press when this gene was discovered because mice with this gene inhibited live roughly 20% longer. Big Pharma thought they'd found another magic pill. However, rapamycin has serious adverse side effects. Intermittent fasting provides the same longevity benefit without the negative side effects. All of these longevity boosters of intermittent fasting add up to a dramatically longer life. In one study, researchers increased the lifespan of mice a mind-blowing 83%, simply by putting them on an alternate day fasting protocol. That's the equivalent of you or me living to age 139. Between the lower risk of disease and the longevity benefits, fasting should be the cornerstone of everyone's plan for a longer and healthier life. Armed with the support of the scientific community and backed by thousands of years of traditional wisdom, I understood that fasting was the missing piece of the health and longevity puzzle. But I also understood that many people will struggle with fasting, and many more will never even give it a try. Because as a society, we've been locked in feast mode. Our bodies have literally forgotten how to burn fat for fuel. And psychologically, we're no longer comfortable with the feelings of hunger and lack of energy. I realized that if I could find a way to make fasting easy, I had a chance to help millions of people. Before we talk about what I discovered, let's clarify what kind of fasting I'm talking about. Long fasts are difficult, unsafe for many people, and unnecessary to get the health benefits that we've been talking about. Personally, I just skip breakfast. Most people finish dinner around 8 p.m. and eat breakfast at around 7 a.m. That means that they've fasted for around 11 hours. By delaying my breakfast until noon, I'm fasting around 16 hours. That's plenty of time for my body to switch to burning fat and lower insulin levels to almost nothing. That simple change has the same health benefits as chronic calorie restriction, and yet doesn't involve starving myself in any way. I eat a large, healthy lunch and a modest dinner. I used to get hungry in the mornings, but I've discovered an easy way to beat the hunger. More about that later. The most popular IF protocol in the UK is called the 5-2 plan. On this program, you eat normally 5 days a week, and 2 days a week, you restrict your calories to about 1/4 of normal. So let's say you normally eat 2,400 calories a day. On a 5-2 plan, you would eat about 600 calories on, say, Tuesday and Thursday. The rest of the week, you eat as normal. That plan is popular because it gives you great flexibility to schedule your calorie-restricted days around other activities like exercise or social commitments. A similar protocol, alternate day fasting, restricts calories every other day. The appeal of this protocol is that on your non-fasting days, you can eat as much as you want. One last protocol I'll mention is 4 to 7 consecutive days of fasting every 3 or 6 months. It's a challenging few days, but some people find that easier to do a few times a year than restricting calories several days a week. Take a minute now to think about which of these fasting protocols best fits into your life. Would you prefer to skip a few meals each day, fast every other day or a couple of days a week, or maybe fast 3 to 4 days continuously a few times a year? Don't worry about being hungry. I'm going to tell you how to beat that in just a second. For right now, just decide, what kind of faster are you? Think about it while I address 2 big questions that I'm sure are in the back of your mind. Won't I get hungry? And will I run out of energy? Those are natural questions. We've all skipped meals and we remember what happened. You get hungry and tired. Even experienced fasters struggle with hunger and lack of energy. In the longest study of IF to date, 64.6% of all fasters failed to maintain the protocol, and these were people in a study. When I first started fasting, I got hungry and tired too, so I went looking for people who have experienced fasting successfully. Fortunately, fasting is a part of every major religious tradition. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and Hindus, just to name a few, all have a tradition of fasting. Christian monks practiced extended fasts several times each year, including the Daniel fast of 21 days, the Nativity fast of 40 days, and the Great Lent fast of 60 days. Traditional Taoist manuscripts describe the series of progressive longer fasts intended to purify the body and soul, starting with an 18-day fast, then a 36-day fast, and culminating in a 72-day fast. So, how did ancient Christians and Taoists manage to fast several times each year? As an herbalist, I know both Taoist and Christian monks were famed for their herbalism. It made sense to me that these herbalists may have had an herbal secret to fasting. There were clues suggesting this possibility. Archaeologists excavating a 12th century monastery in Scotland found something clogging the drains below the ruins. It was an herb with no nutritional value, yet it was everywhere in these drains. Why were the monks using so much of it? That herb has one medicinal use. It's an appetite suppressant. And this group of monks was famed for their extensive herbal knowledge and for the practice of long, purifying fasts. One of the most enduring legends in the Buddhist tradition is the story of Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen Buddhism. After years of fasting and meditation, Bodhidharma became angry with himself for falling asleep. According to legend, to ensure that it would never happen again, he cut off his own eyelids and cast them on the ground. His fallen eyelids instantly sprouted plants that would help him and his students fast and meditate. Armed with these clues, I headed to Asia. In the next video, I'll share with you what I discovered. I'll show you how I applied modern science to an ancient formula to make it accessible to everyone. I'll take you to the actual place where I made this discovery and walk you through the process. And I'll share how you can help make this secret available to the rest of the world. It's unlike anything you've ever seen. I'm both a physicist and an herbalist. Without that strange combination of skills, I couldn't have made this breakthrough. And it scares me to say it, but it feels like destiny. There is an epidemic of bad health in this country. Obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and cancer lead that unhealthy parade. If you don't change something now, the statistics say that one of those conditions has a more than 50% chance of being your cause of death. Intermittent fasting can change that scary future. You can free yourself of those life-threatening conditions and get the life that you deserve. You'll feel more energy. You'll think more clearly. You'll maintain your weight easily and stop craving sweets and carbs. And your life will get easier. Your medical bills will go down. You'll win back the time you spend preparing 3 meals a day. When there's a party or special weekend, you won't have to hold back or feel guilty. Just throw in an extra fast day that week and you're back on track. Finally, you'll get your freedom back. Your health will no longer dictate what you can and cannot do. You'll be the one in charge. You'll be that person long into your latter years who's active and fun to be around. Please, join me in the next video to learn how to make all that possible.